Hello and welcome to the Christ Lutheran Church Sermon Podcast. This is Matthew Best. I serve as pastor of Christ Lutheran Church in Allison Hill in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Thanks for being here. If today's message connects with you and what you're going through, brings you inspiration, or offers connection with God, I ask you to please stay on after the message for just a few moments to learn ways to connect with the congregation and the health ministries that we offer. And now, let's dive into God's Word. Our reading today comes from 1 Kings chapter 5 and chapter 8. Now King Hiram of Tyre sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father, for Hiram had always been a friend to David. Solomon sent word to Hiram, saying, "You know that my father David could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him, until he put them under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune. So I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. As the Lord said to my father David, your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, shall build a house for my name." Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the ancestral houses of the Israelites, before King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. All the people of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the festival in the month of Ethanim, which is the 7th month. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests carried the ark. So they brought up the ark of the Lord, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. The priests and the Levites brought them up. King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel who had assembled before him were with him before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and oxen that they could not be counted or numbered. Then the priests brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the house, the most holy place, underneath the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread out their wings over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim made a covering above the ark and its poles. The poles were so long that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen from outside. They are there to this day. There is nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone that Moses had placed there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites when they came out of the land of Egypt. And when the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell forever." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. My predecessor, Pastor Drew, who many of you know, he had a saying that he told me early on when we were in the transition period. He said that everyone who came to Christ Lutheran Church was in need of healing, and that included the pastor. And I have found that to be absolutely true. And I think it's also, his statement goes beyond what I think he even expected. It applies to the building as well. Which gets into a whole other debates about a lot of things about what is Christ Lutheran Church. It's more than the building, right? So you may remember it's been a little bit over 2 years that I've been here. When I first arrived, plumbing was the issue that needed addressing, and it took a while to deal with. Now, of course, it's the bell tower, and that's actually moving along really well and on schedule, and thank God for that. You got the scaffolding out there, things are blocked off. It's really an impressive structure, and as much as they have invited me to go up, there is no way that I am walking up that scaffolding because I have a fear of heights. I trust people, and they take pictures, and thankfully John has been going up as well, right? It's an expensive project. It is an expensive project. You can just ask Jim about that. It's the kind that when you see the bills, you just kind of wince. Okay, that's a lot of money. But it's necessary to keep everybody safe. That's literally the way that people during normal circumstances walk to get to the clinic. And we do not want stones impaling people on their way to getting health care. The bell tower, like the people who walk through any of the doors, carries the mark of time. It needs repair and restoration. That's why we're doing this. And it's a visible reminder that healing in this place is ongoing. The sanctuary is more than stone and mortar and windows and chains and benches and all that other type of stuff. It's a living place where people encounter God, community, grace, welcome, belonging. The list could go on and on. It's a place where people can simply be who they are. That's the common phrase that I get when people visit. They say, I love this place. People can just be who they are. I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's a sanctuary in a world that too often tramples on people, thrives on cruelty, and seeks to divide and conquer. It is very much a sanctuary in the truest sense of the word sanctuary. Solomon's story in Kings, the first Kings, gives us a lens to see this more clearly. Solomon has completed the temple that his father David longed to build. We can debate about whether this was God saying they should or if they are using God, but that's beside the point. It's a magnificent structure. It's got cedar, it's got stone, it's got all sorts of stuff, gold, an earthly sign of divine reality. That's the intention that it is. It's supposed to be majestic. And yet when the ark is brought into the temple, the people gather as one. And the priests, they're standing ready to minister, maybe in wonderful robes like I have on today. And the glory of God descends, not as a spotlight, but in a cloud so thick that the priests cannot stand to minister. God's presence overwhelms them, and it's mysterious. Even in the splendor, the temple is not big enough to contain God. Solomon built a house for God, but the God who fills it refuses to be confined. This is the paradox of this story. The temple embodies human aspiration and creativity. It's the human desire to honor God. These are all wonderful things. And yet God's glory can't be boxed in. God's presence is more than our skill and craftsmanship. It's more than our control. It's more than our best intentions. And notice this, the dedication of the temple is communal. The whole community is gathered, everyone. It's not just Solomon. Maybe we should stop calling it Solomon's temple. It's not just Solomon who gathers, and it's not just the priests. It's everyone comes together to recognize that God dwells among the people, not only in the building or in the priesthood or the hierarchy or anything like that. God's presence has always been about us, not about one person or me. The covenant of God is made with a people. This communal nature of God's presence is exactly what makes this building holy, not simply as stone and timber, but as a living vessel for God's work. When we gather here for worship, when we share a fellowship meal afterwards, as we'll do again this week, when community groups use this space as a base of operations, when Fit on the Hill does a class right over here, when people come for medical care, when Power to the Hill and Changing the Conversation meet to organize for justice, this building is alive with God's presence. It's full of God because it's full of people who bear God's image, the real temples. And yet, the story of the temple also warns us about the human impulse to put God in a box. We like to contain God. We build spaces, we craft rituals, we design theologies, we carve out hierarchies, all in the hope of keeping God orderly, predictable, convenient, contained. And individualistic faith is one of the most common ways we try to do this. When faith becomes just a private possession, oftentimes we'll hear about I have a personal relationship with Jesus, and that can be okay, but if that's the limit of it, we have a problem. Because we subtly are limiting what God is allowed to touch. We restrict God from having a larger impact. We make God compartmentalized. We tuck God away safely, and we make God sanitary and tidy. We make God anemic and small and almost unimportant. God's welcome in the sanctuary on Sunday, but what about Monday and the rest of the week? So much of our society and our culture loves to claim the name of God, but has no interest in hearing what God has to say. In this way, we conveniently avoid hearing what God really has to say about money and greed, about welcoming immigrants and foreigners, about policies that exploit and harm, about care for the poor and marginalized, about ongoing healing from injustice. And when a pastor dares to preach these things, when a sermon points out where the world and our country or our community are out of alignment with God's way, it often provokes a response, and I'm sure you've heard this before, "Pastor, you're being too political." I've gotten that before, not here, but sometimes I wonder if I'm not political enough. Anyway, but I've had that before, and I have colleagues who have had that before. And usually when I've thought about that, what that usually means, it's a protection. It's shorthand for, please stop, you're making me uncomfortable. You're forcing me to examine what I believe and what I've attached my identity to. And I really don't want to do that. It's a very human response. Too many people have allowed their partisan alignment to become the lens through which they interpret God rather than letting faith form them as a whole and compassionate human beings. God is political in the truest sense of the term. God calls for justice, equity, mercy, love. These are communal things that have big impacts. But God's politics rarely aligns with the American individualism or partisan comfort. Solomon's temple shows us that God can't be contained. Thanks be to God for that. Certainly not by walls or our aspirations, our ideologies, our beliefs. God breaks out of boxes, busts right through them. God defies our attempts to make faith all nice and tidy. The glory of God arrives in a dark, mysterious cloud. That is beautiful. And it overwhelms our expectations and insists that God's presence matters in every corner of life, not just the spaces we've sanctioned. That's why this building, this worshiping community, this church matters. It's a vessel for healing. Healing happens here in worship, of course. We've talked about that a lot. It happens in the clinics, the medical outreach clinic, the dental clinic, Healthy on the Hill. It happens in Fit on the Hill class. It happens in community meetings, in conversations that nurture justice and hope. This building gives glory to God, but not just because of the architecture and the beauty that it has, and not because of its age and its history, although there's a richness there, but because it contains people whose lives reflect God's presence. The bell tower, the roof, the plumbing, they're important because they allow us to continue this work safely. But they are never the source of the glory. The glory is in the people, the living temple of God. And just like in Solomon's temple, the glory of God can't be fully contained. It overflows into the streets, into the neighborhoods, into homes, into lives. We see it in a variety of different ways. We see it when neighbors smile after coming out of the dental clinic because they're no longer in pain. When someone finds that they can do something that they didn't realize they could do after being in a Fit on the Hill class. When advocacy changes policy or hearts, when the hungry are fed, when the isolated find community. God will not be confined to our expectations or our boxes. God shows up where healing is needed, where justice has been denied and where hope is fragile. We also see the same lesson in contrast when we look at the world's monuments and gilded halls. Gilded is gold-plated, but really empty underneath. Humanity has built impressive spaces, palaces and ballrooms, grand churches. But while government workers go unpaid because of a shutdown, while SNAP benefits are cut, and families are finding themselves maybe in food lines for the first time ever, people in positions of power host feasts, banquets, and luxury halls, and they build grand ballrooms. It's a human temptation to make majestic appearance and mistake it for presence. But the glory of God does not dwell in gilded halls. God fills the spaces where healing is happening, where needs are met, where community gathers in courage and love. You know this. I can guarantee you've all felt it. We know where we meet God. We've experienced it. In spite of the world's distortions, God's presence insists on overflow. And today, this is Reformation Sunday in our tradition. The story reminds us of why the church is always reforming. The Reformation at its heart, even though it was 500 years ago, and that's hard to imagine, it was a rediscovery of that the church was never complete and never fully containing God. It's always called to be reformed and reshaped by the living word, by the Spirit, by the demands of justice and mercy in the world. Just as Solomon could build a house for God, but God's glory cannot be contained, so the church must always let God break out of what we think we control and lead us into new life. This is the work of the Spirit, and it is alive here at Christ Lutheran. So the bell tower needs repair. That's going on. And that'll be complete. The roof, at some point, will need addressed. I don't know when. Thankfully, not now. Enough, one project at a time, right? And we'll face whatever challenges that are going to come, because they will come. But as long as God continues to fill this place, whether it be in worship, in meals, and healing, and community, with justice, with love, this will remain a temple of God's glory. And it won't stop here. The good news is that God's glory can't be contained. God isn't just in this place. God busts out. God can't be contained by walls or theology or partisanship, and certainly can't be contained by us. We don't own God. God's presence fills this building, and it overflows into the streets, and it pours into our lives. It challenges us, it heals us, it calls us into action. Every act of care, every gathering, every word of love and advocacy is a manifestation of that uncontained glory. So when we gather for worship, like we do today, when we finally finish the bell tower repairs, and when we share fellowship meals, when we run the clinics, when we exercise, when we speak truth, when we welcome strangers, remember this: God cannot be boxed in. God refuses to be limited. God's glory fills this place and then some, and it overflows. And as we live into that overflow, we're not just maintaining a building. We're participating in the ongoing, ever-reforming work of God. Thanks be to God. Thank you again for listening to the Sermon Podcast. I'm always happy to have a conversation or pray with you. Please reach out either by email to pastor@christharrisburg.org or call me at 717-236-8382. I'd also invite you to be part of worship on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. We're a very diverse, open, affirming, and laid-back congregation. Christ Lutheran Church is located at 124 South 13th Street in Harrisburg. Parking is along the street. You can enter the building through the side entrance on South 13th Street or at the corner of 13th and Thompson Streets. And lastly, check us out on the web. Our website is christharrisburg.org. There you can learn more about and offer your support for the congregation as well as the health ministries and free clinics that we provide to people in need in our neighborhood. I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram also at Christ Lutheran Harrisburg. Thank you. I look forward to connecting with you, and I pray that you have a blessed week.